Economy YouTube channel. Yay! And in this video, we will study about microeconomics segment consumer behavior. So, what do you know about the consumer behavior? We will start it. The theory of consumer behavior that will be discussed in this video explain how consumers make decisions about how much they will consume one goods with consideration of the amount of consumption of other goods. In general, there are two approaches in explaining consumer behavior as stated by the law of demand. So these consumer behavior approaches include: first, the cardinal approach or marginal utility approach. Second, ordinal approach or indifference curve approach. Then first we will discuss about the cardinal approach. So the cardinal approach is based on the assumption that the use or satisfaction or utility of each consumer can be measured nominally or cardinal in nature. Satisfaction in consuming a goods or a service is based on the comparison between the benefit obtained and the cost that must be incurred. Use value or satisfaction obtained from consumption is called total utility. Meanwhile, the additional use of adding one unit of goods and or services consumed is called marginal utility. The marginal utility function related to the use value of consumption, which cannot be arbitrarily multiplied without changing the differences between the value of various consumer goods and or services. Then the consumer behavior study using the cardinal approach is as follows. First, utility that can be measured in money. Second, rationality, because we are as a consumer are rational. Consumers try to perform maximum utility up to the specified income limit. Consumer income is limited by the price of the goods and or services consumed. Consumers have a limiting function in which the amount of income or M equals the price of the goods or P times the quantity of goods or Q. Or you can see the formulas here. Then consumer become irrational if income is not the same as the price of goods multiplied by the good of goods consumed. Third, we have constant marginal utility of money. This assumption is necessary if the unit of value or monetary unit is used as a measure of utility. As a standard measure, the monetary unit must be constant. If the marginal utility of money changes with change in income, then the monetary unit cannot be used as a measure. Fourth, we have Gaussian law applied, or we can call it the diminishing of marginal utility. In this law said that the more goods and or services consumed, the additional satisfaction or marginal utility obtained by each additional unit consumed decrease, where additional satisfaction or marginal utility is a change in use value or total utility due to a change in the consumption of one unit of goods and or services. And five, the last, consumer always try to achieve maximum total satisfaction or total utility. Total utility is the amount of satisfaction obtained by consumer due to consuming several types of goods, or we can say it in the relationship between the amount of satisfaction with some of the goods consumed. Everyone will definitely get different satisfaction in consuming the same number of goods. This depends on how a person condition is in consuming it. Then after we know about the total utility, now about marginal utility. Marginal utility is additional satisfaction due to consumption of an item per unit. This means that consumers who consume more than one item each increase in their consumption of their goods and or services will get additional satisfaction. So, the main hypothesis of utility theory, or better known as the law of diminishing marginal utility, states that the additional use value that consumer will get from consuming an item will be less if the consumer continues to increase his consumption of the item. In the end, additional satisfaction will be negative if the consumption of these goods is added by one more unit, then the total utility will decrease and the marginal utility will be negative. Now, okay, we will see the table and the curve about total utility and marginal utility. Okay, now you can see this is the table for total utility and marginal utility. As you can see, as our consumption of an item increase, as our consumption of an item increase, our total utility will continue to rise. This in the total utility will continue to rise. But at a certain point, our total utility will be decreased and can even reach point zero again. This is the high value of from total utility, but at this point, after this point, the total utility will be decreased and can even reach point zero again when we continue our consumption of that item. From this table, we shape it into a curve as you can see here. Okay, so now you can see the total utility and marginal utility curve. This is the total utility curve and this is the marginal utility curve. So consumer will obtain maximum total satisfaction or total utility at the level of consumption or purchase with the sacrifice for the purchase of the last unit of the goods is the same as the additional satisfaction obtained from the last unit. Nah, this is the maximum satisfaction from the consumer. You can see in this point. This is the higher point. Sorry, this is the higher point in the total utility. So when the price of goods rises, in order to reach a position of maximum total satisfaction, consumer will choose a lower level of consumption. Then the marginal utility curve. This is the marginal utility curve. It's nothing but the consumer demand curve. Now you can see that it is as same y as a demand curve because it shows the level of purchase or quantity demanded at various price level. Now you know that economic theory is sometimes incompatible with conditions in everyday life. For example, the price of water is lower or can be said to be very low when compared to the relatively high price of gold, or we can call it jewelry. In fact, water is a very important necessity and more valuable than the jewelry. Now, this is what we often refer to as the value paradox. The high and low price of an item can be explained by the production cost theory, which states that the higher the production cost, the higher the price of the goods. For this reason, the price of jewelry is higher than water, given the high cost of production and the types of goods that are scarce. Unlike water, which is easily available in various places, and to obtain it doesn't require too much cost. The difference in the price of jewelry and water can also be caused by very different marginal utility. Water that is easily available results in a very low marginal use value. Marginal use value or marginal utility, which determine the high and low price of an item. Now, in other side, Consumers also often enjoy excess utility, otherwise known as consumer surplus. Consumer surplus essentially means the difference between the satisfaction that consumers get in consuming goods and or services and the sacrifice that must be paid to obtain these goods and or services. The satisfaction obtained by consumer is always greater than the sacrifice or payment incurred. Consumer surplus occurs when the consumer wants to go to the supermarket to buy fried rice or nasi goreng with the money of 10,000 rupiah. The money that consumer bring is a sacrifice that consumer will make to get a fried rice. Arriving at the shop or at the supermarket, it turns out the price of fried rice is discounted and can be purchased for 7,000 rupiah. So that consumer have a change in money of 3,000 rupiah. Now, which is that can be called a consumer surplus. We then discuss the first approaches in consumer behavior, that is cardinal approach. Now, we will discuss about the second approach. Now, the second approach, we have an ordinal approach. The ordinal approach is based on the assumption that the use or satisfaction or utility of each consumer cannot be measured nominally or cannot be calculated or is ordinal. Usability or satisfaction can only be compared to a higher or lower statement. The ordinal approach theory uses an approach indifferent curve. The indifferent curve function is a utility function that produces or assigns a rating to the goods and or services consumed. The study of consumer behavior using our ordinal approach as follows. First, assume as the cardinal approach, that is rationality. Consumers are always assumed to be rational. Consumers try to maximize their satisfaction or maximizing utility with the amount of income and also have complete knowledge or certainty about all relevant information regarding prices. A rational consumer also means that more consumption of goods and or services will provide greater satisfaction. To consume these goods and or services, of course, requires a certain amount of money to pay for them. Nah, this money is often called a budget, or we can call it a certain amount of money. Second, utility is ordinal. Consumers are able to assess their preference by making level of various types of goods and or services according to the satisfaction provided by each type of goods and or services. Consumers express their preference in the form of an indifferent map or a collection of indifferent curves, where the indifferent curve is the consumption or purchase of goods and or services that produce the same level of satisfaction. Third, we have diminishing marginal rate of substitution. The preferences are sorted based on their level of value with the same satisfaction curve, which is assumed to be convex to the origin or convex to the 0 point of the curve. Fourth, total utility obtained by consumer depends on the quantity of goods consumed. 5. Consistency and transitivity of choice. Nah, consumers are assumed to be consistent with their choice. This means that if consumers prefer the A goods to B goods, then the B goods will not be preferred over A goods. The consistency assumptions are follows. Now, consumer choice is assumed to exhibit transitive nature. If A goods are preferred over B goods and B goods are preferred over C goods, then A goods are preferred over C goods. The consistency assumptions are as follows. Then in the ordinal approach, we have two curves. The first curve is indifferent curve. Nah, indifferent curve or equal satisfaction curve is a position of point of combination of goods that provide the same level of satisfaction or utility to consumer. Symbolically, the indifferent curve can be expressed by the equation. The K is represented as a constant. This means that the level of satisfaction doesn't change the consumer move along the same satisfaction curve. So, this indifferent curve has various properties, namely, the first, the shape of the curve descends from top left to the bottom right. Second, convex toward the origin or 0 point in the curve. C, or the third, don't cut each other. Fourth, the farther from the origin describe the higher of level satisfaction or utility. And the last is the higher level of satisfaction is located on the top right. Now, replacement of consumption of goods illustrates the amount of sacrifice for the consumption of one good to increase the consumption of other goods, while at the same time maintaining the level of satisfaction it gets. The sacrifice made is called the marginal replacement rate. The impact of the lesser marginal replacement rate, the less likely the indifferent curve, the longer the slope or the shape of the indifferent curve is concave to point 0. Now, the advantage of the indifferent curve approach compared to the marginal utility approach includes: the first is there is no need to assume that consumer utility is cardinal. And second, the effect of a change in price on the quantity demanded can be through the substitution effect and the income effect. And another advantage of the indifferent curve approach is shown by several other factors that influence consumer demand for an item. Now, in the beginning, I said to you that in the ordinal approach, we have two curves. There are indifferent curve and budget line. Now we will see how about the indifferent curve and budget line. Now you can see that this table and figure show that the 6 possible combination of nasi goreng and nasi rawon are at point A, B, C, D, E, and F that each have the same level of satisfaction. Consider the change that occurs from point A to point B. This change increases the consumption of rawon rice or nasi rawon from 1 unit to 2 units. The increase in consumption occurs due to reduced consumption of nasi goreng from 15 units to 11 units. The situation shows that in order to maintain the level of satisfaction enjoyed by consumer, you must remember the important thing that combined consumption gives the same amount of satisfaction. Now, from the table above, now you can move the table into the indifferent curve, Nah, this is the amount of nasi goreng and this is the amount of nasi rawon with all of the position A, point B, point C, point D, point E, and point F. Nah, this is we know about the indifference curve. Then after you know the form or the shape of the indifferent curve, now the figures show the various levels of the same satisfaction curve or indifferent curve between IC1, IC2, IC3, and IC4. 4. Remember that this indifferent curve has its own characteristic. One of them is that the farther away from the origin illustrates the higher level of satisfaction or utility. Now, so the level of satisfaction shown by IC4 is the highest level of satisfaction when compared to other IC curve. Meanwhile, the satisfaction level shown by IC1 is the smallest level of satisfaction among other IC curve. Now we are entering the realm of budget line. This is the table 4.3 that have point A until point F are the consumer spending budget line according to the income they have. If the consumer spends his income at that point, the consumer is able to consume the goods to the maximum without a deficiency or excess budget. This is, you can see the budget line, the real budget line. We have point A, B, C, D, E, and F, and also we have the point M and point P. The point A until point F are the situation when the consumer is able to consume the goods to the maximum without a deficiency or excess budget. But the situation is different if the consumer chooses to buy goods with the amount indicated by point P. This is in the point P. Then the consumer will get a combination of the goods purchased and get excess money for this purchase when in point P. Meanwhile, if consumer choose to buy goods with the amount indicated by point M, this is the point M, then consumer will not get a combination of goods to be purchased because consumer need more money than their income to get the combined goods and the number of goods according to the point M. That's all about consumer behavior theory in this video. Now, do you understand about the consumer behavioral theory? If you still have any question about consumer behavior theory, you can drop your question in the comment box. Okay, thank you for watching Class Economy YouTube channel. See you again in another video in this channel about economics. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment this YouTube channel. I will see you again next time. Bye bye!